Hey everyone, today I'm going to be teaching you about opposite cross, where you solve the cross with two edges swapped and then fix it sometime during the solve. So there's two main things I want to talk about. One of them is how to do this, like what tricks you can use to actually save time. And the other one is when you should do this, because obviously solving the cross is usually better than not solving the cross. Let's start with how do you use it. Okay, so basically what you have two of these edges swapped, DF and DB. You can fix them with M2 to M2. And what that does, it also swaps UF and UB. You could do this right after cross, but you might as well, if you're already doing this, then you might as well do something else with it. Let's give an example. Example, you have this case. Usually you do something like this, maybe, or this. But if you have M2 to M2 cross, you can do M2 to M2 to move the edge by U2, and now they're paired up. Again, I'll show this example again. If you have this case, and the edge needs to go a U2 away, you can do M2 to M2, and then they're paired up. Let's give another example. Alright, here's another example. You have this case, and you need to do an RU to R prime to pair the pair up. Or you need to move the edge U2 by a U2 to pair them up. So you can do M2, U2, M2, and that pairs up this pair. I'll show this again. If the edge needs to move by a U2, you can do M2 to M2 and insert the pair. Here's another example. This case isn't as good as the ones I've showed you before, but I think it's still better than the normal solution. You have this case is bad, and usually any solution starts by splitting these pieces up. So you can split them up and fix the cross at the same time, and then solve the pair. I probably wouldn't recommend doing this, but you can if you don't feel comfortable with last layer stuff. Anyway, that's about it for F2L. You might be able to come up with more tricks for similar cases. Alright, let's move on to OLL. So this is a pretty bad OLL. Notice if these two edges swapped, then that would be the good P-shape OLL. So you can do that, M2 to M2, and now we have this P-shape, which is one of the best OLL Algs. Here's another example. This might not be super useful depending on how you're, like what you do for this OLL. If your left hand turning is really good, then this might not be a good example. But you can do M2 to M2 for this case, and turn it into the righty case. Here's another case. This is the M prime plus soon. It's pretty okay alg, but I don't like it. But you can do M2 to M2, and they get a fat soon, which is better. Okay, but overall, there's not much you can do with it during OL, but during PLL you can do a lot. If you know about 4x4 parity tricks, like PLL parity, this is exactly the same. Let's give an example. Let's say you have this case. You can recognize it by like these two bars, as well as there being an opposite here. You can also recognize it with less, but that's the easiest way to explain it. And if you do a J-perm here, to swap these pieces, you'll just be left with an M2 to M2. But where this really shines for PLL is if you have the corners solved, and you just need to solve last 6 edges, or 4 edges on top layer, and DF plus DB. And that's where this really shines, because these algs can be only MU, and these are really good algs. So if you can, while doing OLL, if you know COLL, or know OLLCP, or can force solved corners, that's really good. And yeah, let's give an example. Let's say you're finishing up OLL, and you get this. This is a W perm, and you can recognize all these cases just by two sides, like how you can recognize normal EPLLs by two sides easily. This one from these two sides looks like a Z perm. It looks like it's gonna be these two. So I know it's gonna be a W perm. A W perm is where you have two opposites. And there are, I think, 6 or 7 cases, I'm not entirely sure, and they're all really fast. One of them is it's only about a second, and the rest are really fast. So this one, for example, W perm starts like a U perm, and then ends a bit differently. really fast. And obviously you have the chance of getting this PLL, and this is obviously just M2 to M2. This is amazing. If you get this, it's basically a PLL skip. Okay, so that's basically how to use opposite cross. You could also maybe do like super fancy things like once in a lifetime. If you somehow have these two edges swapped, you can do R2D2, R2D2, R2, D2. But you're probably not going to do that. That's really rare. Let's talk about when you should do opposite cross, because usually you shouldn't. And there are a few really specific cases. One, if your cross is something like this, this is my yellow cross, these two pieces are swapped, this one is solved, and this one can go with an R prime. The way to solve this is something like D2, R prime, D2, R, D2. And that's 5 moves. There's a lot compared to just one move. It's just an R prime for opposite cross. So if the normal cross is really bad and opposite cross is really good, then you could do this, because this is actually even just R prime then M2 to M2 is 4 moves instead of 5. But then again, you could do you could save the M2 to M2 for later to solve something else at the same time. This isn't just this case, it's also, for example, this case, or if you get this solved. If you have this, then I'd probably just do U2, R2, D2, R2 for my cross. Yeah, but for any case where normal cross is not good, opposite cross is really short, then you could do it. Let's go on to the second case. The second case is a bit more specific, and it's only really useful if you do lots of X crosses, but it's when you have this. This is like a square, but this edge is opposite, and it's pretty hard to preserve this sometimes. For example, if I do this here, this corner moves out, this messes up. But if you solve this with up cross, like treat this as solved and solve the green into here, so this is 3 pieces solved, then you basically get a free square, and squares are really good for building X crosses because you just need to insert the edge and then you have an X cross. Another use for opposite cross while making the cross is that you can either finish like this or you can finish like this, a D2 away, and this can be helpful while making like X crosses or setting up for your next pair. As for example here, this edge is solved, so if we just do a D2 here, then that solves this pair. And if we, for example, if we were here, we could choose either do a D or a D prime, and that would result in either these 2 edges being swapped or these 2 edges being swapped. And obviously here you can do D, and that basically solves the pair for free. And the third and probably last reason to know how to do opposite cross is just because sometimes you can mess up. Like you think you're solving your cross, then midway during F2L, you realize you have 2 edges swapped. Instead of panicking, not knowing what to do, just doing an M2 to M2 to fix it right away, you could use that as an advantage to force a better PLL, better OLL, better F2L case, PLL skip. Okay, so that's how and when to use opposite cross. Now let's give a few example solves. This one is one I got 3 days ago. It was a 4.53, so a good solve. And I honestly think the scramble would be bad without opposite cross. I'll put the scramble on screen and just in the description. I want you guys to try it out, like see what you can find on this scramble before looking at what I did. Okay, so here's the scramble, and this doesn't look that good right away, but we have this. So I'll instantly consider doing opposite cross because this is gonna be like a pre-made square. Yeah. So let's see, where's the edge that would go with this corner? It's right here. Oh, that works really nicely because to solve this edge, we want to do a D2L, and that's gonna solve this at the same time. And okay, so what about the last edge? Last edge is over here. If before we do that L, we do a U2, it's gonna move over here and then over to here, so you can do an F prime to insert it. But also, let's notice this edge is gonna move to be solved. Where's the corner gonna be? Corner's gonna do, it's right here, So you get D2, L, D. Oh wow, it's also going to be solved. So when we do D2, U2, L, F prime D, we actually solved two pairs at the same time. So that's what I did. And this is like a really good part of the solve because it's like a double X cross in 5, 6 moves. Anyway, the F2L is pretty standard here. I started with this pair. And then I had this pair. And here, because they had my edges swapped like DR and DL, and doing like this is really weird. So I just rotated. I noticed that this is the soon OLL, but it's actually also the soon COLL. I'm gonna get soft corners. So I do soon, and then I quickly recognize you could do either by this or by these two. Going by these two is really easy. It's just, you see, it's just these two swapped. If it's these two, then I can still recognize that's these two swapped. And for this case, I use this alg. There's a bunch of algs for this, like 4 or 5 I think, that are all basically equally as good. You could do like this into M2 to M2. You could do this. But I use this alg. And yeah, that's actually the worst case you can get. Like probably by around 0.3 or something. The rest of the cases are really fast. This one's but still this solve was good enough to get a 4.5, and this would have been probably like a 7 or an 8 without opposite cross. Alright, I've never seen this scramble before. I've literally just pulled it up from CS Timer. I was looking for you know, these things, or maybe the other situation where I mentioned you could do opposite cross. So let's see. I see this, I'm going to instantly look at yellow, and this corner could be solved. So I'm going to look where the edge is, and this seems scripted because this is actually really good. Because if I do D2R to solve this red edge, so it also solves this edge. So that's really good. Alright, wow, this scramble's really good. Okay, I can expect all of F2L here, I think. Oh my god, okay, this is a really good solve. So, let's start with inspecting second pair. The cross is going to be D2RDL, like D2R, then put this in. Okay, let's look at this pair first. This is going to do an R, D, the L is going to be here, and then L. But if I do a U prime before the L, sorry, this is going to do D2, D2 is going to do nothing, R is going to move the L to here, D is going to move to here, L is going to move it to here. And none of these moves affect this edge besides the last L, so it's going to be here. But if we do a U prime before the last L, we're going to have this pair, and that's just an LUL prime. Okay, let's look at this pair now. This corner is going to do D2R, that does nothing, U prime, L2, U, L prime. The L is going to end up over here, and the edge, it's going to do D2, D, L2, U, L prime. It's going to be over here. That's going to be a pre-made pair. Okay. And then, so that's going to be here, and we can insert it over to here. Let's look at our last pair. These two, D2R, the L's going to be here, D. And that's all that's going to happen to it, like before we insert this pair. And this edge, D2R, U prime, U, yeah, it's going to be over here. So this is going to be pretty hard to see, but you have the yellow corner here, this the edge over here, and it's oriented. No, it's not oriented because it started off not oriented. And we have our pair over here. So there's this cool multi-sliding thing. If we move the pair over to here, and this pair over to this edge over to here, and then insert with an R prime U2R, these are going to pair up by doing an R prime. You probably couldn't follow this, I'm sorry, but I'm really excited. This is going to be a really good solve. Okay, so that was my So that's what I would do for F2L. Now let's actually show this because I don't think anyone understood what I said. So I start with D2 RD, this pair is solved, and I'm about to insert this with an L, but I have this pair, so I do U prime before inserting, L to U L prime. That made this pair. If I insert it like this is a bad case. If I insert it with the U prime then this, then that's a good case. This is a made pair. Now here I could do this. This is probably better, but I would probably rotate. And yeah, I know this case. I know this sort of VLS, I guess. Not exactly, but I just know which OLL I'm gonna get because look at the corners. This is like an OLL skip, so it's just gonna be these two unoriented edges. And because I have these on the side, I want these on the front and back. I'm gonna rotate already. And this is a diagonal case of this OLL, and I do know this OLL CP goes like this. And we got lucky, and we got M2 to M2. For this last part, I could do U or U prime before. If I did U prime, which is better because that means no AF. If I start with the U, I would need to do a U2 afterwards. That's not that big of a deal. Like even if you do U, it's just one more move. Yeah, that's a really good solve, a really good solution. I mean, and this would probably be like a sub 5 or a low 5 if I don't mess up the OLL, because sometimes like I try to go too fast and then don't recognize like OLCP or anything. But yeah, that shows you M2 to M2 is good, and you should sometimes use it. Also, one like F2L on just a random scramble, that's sick. That's really cool. Okay, let's teach you what all the cases are. First one, M2 to M2. This is easy. Two opposite edges, and the way to recognize this by two-sided PL recognition is one bar is solved. There's one solved bar, and there's one opposite here. The green is opposite to blue, so this is just M2 to M2. Case number 2, this is adjacent. We have just these two edges to swap. Let's go over two-sided recognition. From here it's easy, it's just these two. From here, if you have a bar, and this one isn't opposite like the last case, but it's adjacent, that means these two need to swap. If it's just two self bars, then these two in the back need to swap because you can't get like solved PLL when you have two swapped edges. And if it's this, then you see these two need to swap. So there's a bunch of Algs for this case. I use this one. But you can also use like maybe this. Oh, I messed it up. Like some kind of sexy move into M2 to M2. Or you could also use this. This is probably the fastest, but I don't like it because it's not as reliable. Because you do this and then have to both finish with the U2 and do UAOF. But it is pretty fast. I could also do like more sexy move variations like this, maybe. Yeah, but I use this case. Next case, this is a W perm. It gets a bit tricky to recognize if you don't know what you're looking for, but this case is basically you have two here, these look adjacent, and two opposite edges. If you recognize it from here, then this is good because it's just two opposite. And from any other angle, if you have one adjacent, one opposite, which is these two angles, they know it's a W perm with these two opposite here. And if you have no opposites, but these two don't need to swap, see this needs to go here, this needs to go there, instead of these two needing to swap, then this is W perm with the opposites here. And the out for this, mirror this if you're left-handed, if you do left-handed M moves. But it starts like this U perm, then instead of finishing with a U prime M2, you finish with a U M2. Okay, the next two cases are mirrors of each other, clockwise O and counterclockwise O. For each of these, the U moves goes against the direction. So for this one, this is a clockwise O, and you recognize it's the same on every side. just like you have this checkerboard, these edges go clockwise, and so the edges go clockwise, so I do counterclockwise U-turns, and this is the alg. All the U's were U primes, and for the other case, which is counterclockwise, though it's the same alg, but instead of U primes you have U's. So yeah, these are all the cases and how to recognize them. You can figure out the AOFs for yourself. It's useful to know them, but I'm not going to be going over that because it's just like, you know, recognize the AOF after a T perm or an R perm or whatever. So yeah, that's opposite cross. I'm going to go over this again. You don't need to do this every solve. This probably isn't better than just doing a cross normally, but if you get a good situation to do this, or just by accident, get an opposite cross, this is how to deal with that.